And how will you celebrate his life?
By continuing the fight.
Song. And how will you celebrate his life? By continuing the fight. Song. Hiking.
Being kind.
Being kind. Spreading love. Creating community. Will you comfort others as he did? Will you honor the sacrifice of your teachers? Will you claim your share in the power of solidarity? Yes. These are the questions I am provoked to ask myself every chance I get because of the love, faith, and courage of Alan Cooper. We are here to celebrate the life of Alan Cooper, also known as the guy who had more courage than he knew what to do with. A man in which nothing would turn him around. One whose capacity for love was without concern for the consequences. And these are just a few of the words that I have heard about Alan Cooper. And I look forward to hearing from each of you, whether it's tonight or in the course of our lives, about your side of the tale of Alan Cooper. In this moment, I'm going to ask a few folks to come up and share their side. And these people, like yourself, I know Alan Cooper would consider his teachers. I'd like to begin with his son. You ready for this? Malcolm Cooper.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to see the turnout in honor of my dad. He taught so many people so many different things, and this isn't a sad time. This is a good time to rejoice in the memories that he's left us all with. I continue to try to pass them down to my children, and he was just a great guy. He's touched us in so many ways, and I mean, he wasn't afraid to call people out on their stuff, and he wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed in time and time again. It's funny, people always say, like, we're real different. My dad was on one path, and I did what I wanted to do. I mean, most of us already know that. But he wasn't afraid to call me on my shit either, and always loved me for who I was, faults and everything, and that's what he continued to do with everybody and everything. I couldn't ask for a better person to raise me. I remember one time I told him that he wasn't even my dad when we were fighting, and he told me it takes a lifetime to be a father, but 5 minutes to make a baby, so remember that. And just one of the times that he's called me on the stuff that I've done, and I just, I say, you're right, you've taught me everything that I've known, and continue to give me the strength that I need to proceed and pursue my life, and make sure I give my children a really happy time like he gave me. I have nothing but great memories and photos and stuff. I remember the good. The last few years haven't been so great for him, and I think he is in a better place, and he is much happier knowing that he is free of that concubine body of his that was kind of trapped. But he was fighting even then, trying to leave that place, and fell and broke his hip and got better. And I mean, I think it was a constant battle for him to get out of there. And he's gone, and we can just remember the good times that we've all shared with my dad. And thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
And I hope with each clap, you guys are also clapping for yourselves, because there's something about you that Alan Cooper shared with, and that he treasured and he saw as a teacher. So we're also celebrating a little bit of Alan in all of us. Yeah. Danny Cash. Is Danny Cash here? His lifelong friend, Danny Cash.
So, remembering the word, we are remembering Alan. And remembering is there's a couple of ways to look at it. I didn't remember to pick up my keys off the seat of the car when I locked it a couple of nights ago. I remembered to take the trash out. Also, remembering is bringing forth from the past the presence, I believe, of who we are remembering. And I'm grateful to be able to remember Alan, and remembering Alan from my first memory of him was in the second grade. He came into the second grade. We were at a private school. He came into the class in the middle of whatever term it was. And he looked a lot like that photograph of in the middle of that board down there of his picture from St. Mary's. He was this chunky, stocky kid, and his hair was about like it is. And you know, history is prelude in a lot of ways. And here we are, we're standing around at recess, and here's this new kid, and we're getting acquainted with him, and we're about 9 years old, and he starts talking about the atomic bombs that are stored at Manzano.
Let's go get him.
So his dad was I think it was a colonel or in the army or one of the services, and so Alan was getting his information from somebody that knew what was going on out there, and he was aware of it and enough to talk about it. So that was my very first knowledge of Alan, and then we were in grade school together, and then junior high and high school we were apart. He went to St. Mary's, I think, Catholic school. I went to a public school, and we really didn't see each other for a number of years. And one time, I was down on Central, 4th and Central, and with my mom, and we were walking around, and here Alan sees me and starts talking, and he says, well, he talks about, he was in a youth group at the Episcopal Cathedral there, and he says there's a retreat, a camp coming up, and would I want to go? So I did, and that's the first connection I had with Alan from 7th grade until probably about the 10th grade, and we picked up where we left off. We always picked up where we left off. We didn't ever talk much about social stuff. I was in the process of trying to become a male in our culture at the time, and Alan was just a really good friend all that time. And we would do things together. We would go to church. He was in an acolyte. I was in an acolyte. We went to church camps together. We went out on dates together, blind dates together. His dad and his stepdad and his mom rented a hay wagon one time, and we were doing that, and he was in the back of the hay wagon cuddling with a girl by the name of Joan Julian, and I was in the back of the hay wagon cuddling with Shelby over here. and we just did stuff together, and we had a good relationship. He was very, very he was socially aware and socially active even then on a very spontaneous way. One time we were driving down Central, down past the university, and we were driving along, and he spotted some guy that was on the street and was homeless. And he demanded that he stop. And so he got out, engaged this man, and we ended up, he ended up instituting, taking him and finding him a place to sleep for that night. And it was not a quick thing. It was probably around midnight or something like that. So we found Alan found this place for this man to stay. And then he, the next day, followed up and did whatever he did with him after that, helped him out, helped him along. And he was always looking out for somebody else. And he was adamant about it. And it was spontaneous, and it was, this is what we're going to do type of thing. So so then high school, he was at another high school, but we still got together through other means. And then in college, about that time, he went to the Navy, and I think he got a general discharge because he painted the Midway pink because of his color blindness, if I remember correctly. And I don't know what else the story was, but that's what he did. And then through college, we were in and out of he somehow or another let me talk him into joining or pledging a fraternity on campus, and that lasted probably a couple of weeks. He didn't do too well with that kind of stuff. I think he chafed at authoritarian personalities and authority that was oppressive kind of authority. You have to do this. I think he had some issues with his stepdad because of that, and so we didn't see too much of each other in college. I was never socially active like he was, or at all, for many, many years. I've become more conscious of that as I go on. But he never held it against me. Our friendship was very deep, and it was, we got together, and when we had been apart for a long time, there was no break. We just went on. And so then he was here, and I was in California, and I was married to a woman from Farmington, and she got killed on the freeway, and we had the service in Farmington for where she was from, and I was just a mess. I was by myself. Oh, sorry. I was at my mom and dad's house, and I didn't want to talk to them about how I was feeling, and I thought about Alan for some reason, and I hadn't seen him for probably 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years, and I found his address probably through the phone book, and I went over and knocked on the door, and here is this older bald guy. It came to the door, and I didn't recognize him at first, so it's been that long since he had changed, and I hadn't seen him. And that man, we went out on the curb and sat there, and he let me bawl my eyes out. And all he did was love me. He loved me to pieces, and he always did that. And I loved him too. And our relationship was based on, thinking about it, it was just based on love and loving each other. And I am grateful to my deepest part of that he was in my life. I love that man. And I think that he's here. I think we are bringing his remembrance, his essence, And I think he's here with us tonight, or today, so.
Well, as many of you know, Alan Cooper was down for the cause. He put his body on the line, and he wasn't afraid of going to jail, which is why it's always good to have a lawyer friend. His lawyer friend, Roger Finzel.
Thank you. I met Alan Cooper in 1973 in July after Wounded Knee had happened when I went up there to help with the trials that were coming up, and there was Alan in the middle of it all. He had more charges against him than Russell Means, Dennis Banks, or any other person, and that's a fact. Because the government wanted to get Alan Cooper because of his civil rights work, because of his university activities here, his anti-war protests, his getting expelled from the university for protesting a racist senator. They wanted to get him, so he was their target, and they put him first on the trial schedule because they wanted to make out that Wounded Knee was about outside agitators, and of course it was not. Alan went out there to help out. So Alan did the right thing. He pled guilty to one charge and reserved his right to raise the treaty defense, saying he was working under the sovereignty of the American Indians and at Pine Ridge. And he continued to hang out with the defense committee for the next 2 years. And the next people that went to trial, by the way, they actually went to trial, were a couple of women who were charged with stealing toys from the trading post for their children. We got to see what Wounded Knee was really about in that trial. And of course, the judge found them not guilty. So there came a time when there was another terrible incident in Custer, South Dakota. I won't go into the details. The people got charged with rioting. They had to move the trial to Sioux Falls on the other side of the state. And they were tried by a judge by the name of Judge Bottom. He was the worst racist you could imagine. And Judge Bottom said that everybody had to stand up in his courtroom. Now, we researched that. There's no law that says you got to stand up in the courtroom. The defendants have to stand up, the lawyers have to stand up, but the audience doesn't have to stand up. Well, he didn't see it that way, and so they had a hearing. The judge came in, the defendants stood up. The Indian people who were there did not. The Lutheran bishops who were there to witness it, they stood up, and the SWAT team came in and clubbed everybody, including the defendants. And out of that, people came rushing in from the defense committee to come to their aid inside the courtroom. And Russell Means said, get out of here, get out of here. There's nothing going to be but bloodshed if we do that. And they stopped. But out of that came more charges. Alan Cooper, of course, being the outside agitator, was charged for trying to come to their defense, along with another man, John Kincannon, who was another person who had come to help out with the defense committee, and Bobby Joe and Lois Tiger, who were AIM activists from Sioux Falls, a housewife and her daughter who was trying to be a model, and of course Vernon Bellecourt. And Russell Means. Russell had a separate trial. And so Alan decided he'd seen enough of everything, decided to be his own lawyer, and we did 7 weeks of what's called voir dire, where you examine the jurors, because we knew from early scientific jury selection that there was no place in South Dakota we could get a fair jury, period. And we went through 112 jurors, one by one. And we had 12 that were seated, and at that point, the judge wasn't sure that they were not biased. So he threw out the charges. And I'll tell you this, Alan did a hell of a job doing that questioning himself. I left with Ida, and we went to Washington, D.C., continued working there, and I had to move because I couldn't breathe anymore in D.C. The pollution was getting to me. And we looked around the country, and we had many places we could move because we had many friends from many places. And we decided that we were going to come to Albuquerque because Alan was here. And we knew that here there would be activity, there would be lots of things going on, and that Alan Cooper would be there in the front of it. I met one man when I moved here who had gone to college, and we were talking, and he was not an activist. In fact, he was what you'd call a right-winger. And he said, I told him I knew Alan. He said, oh, I hate that guy, a radical, blah, blah, blah. And what he said then, he also said, well, one thing I'll give him, he was always in the front. If he said he was going to do something, he was there. He was in the front, he was facing the bayonets, he was doing whatever had to be done. He was a man who was committed to everything. Now, we could call Alan Cooper a lot of different names. We could call him courageous. We could call him brave. We could call him committed. But there's one word that I always think of Alan Cooper as. And Alan Cooper is a hero.
Well, I don't have anything to follow that. But I do want to introduce our next speaker, and I share a similar connection with Alan via community media, and that's how I myself came to be involved in social justice work and the movement. And I want to also introduce someone who is also a good dear friend of mine, Alan's producer, Sue Skirman.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. Is that better, Willard? Okay. Most of all, Alan was a revolutionary motivated by great love. I love that line from Alan's obituary. I think it captures him so well. I can picture him sitting calmly with a Cheshire grin on his face and a gleam in his eyes, as if his calm demeanor was hiding the fact that at all times he was ready to rise up if circumstances called for him to take action in defense of justice and fighting against oppression in all of its forms. Like the Proclamation said, Alan was a fearless and courageous Albuquerque resident who, hi Bill, Bill Orson, who gave his heart and soul to the movement in spite of institutional harassment and surveillance from all levels of government, imprisonment, loss of jobs, and other failed attempts to silence him. Alan Fairfax Cooper was my friend, comrade, and mentor. He liked to remind us that his middle name Fairfax came from the side of his family heritage that owned enslaved people, something he was deeply ashamed of. He also proudly traced his lineage back on the other side of his family to the abolitionist Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote the highly influential novel Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. I know these things about Alan because I was one of many people over decades who Alan asked to help edit his memoir. Someday I hope his memoir is published, either by a publisher or at least self-published by his family and made available to a wider audience. His stories from the civil rights movement in the Deep South to Wounded Knee to anti-war activism here in New Mexico deserve to be told. Alan somewhat bashfully suggested the title of his memoir be Honky Killer, which was the nickname that Russell Means gave to him at Wounded Knee. At the time, I was horrified, and I strongly urged him to come up with a more subdued title, Venceremos, Stories from the Trenches of Social Justice Activism. He agreed. Now, as my own politics have evolved to be more radical, I regret second-guessing Honky Killer as the appropriate title. It has been an interesting process organizing today's memorial. Very similar to most social justice organizing that I've been involved in, I used to use the phrase sausage making a lot to describe the rocky process. The final result is tasty, but you don't want to know how it was made. Alan had a huge influence and impact on so many people's lives, including after he passed on. His impact remains. When a small group of his friends and comrades came together to write his obituary, we wrestled with how to characterize his involvement at Wounded Knee. Was it an occupation, an uprising, an armed rebellion, nonviolent resistance? We disagreed. And it made me think. Alan lived his life in uncompromising terms that not everyone agreed with. He did not hesitate to take up arms to defend Indigenous people, Black Panthers, anti-war protesters, and others. He was a social justice warrior in a literal sense. And that side of him, his militant side, did not sit well with peaceniks who held a purist view on nonviolence. And these debates continue to this day. Another comrade and mentor of mine, a person of color who is actually running for office right now, once challenged my views on nonviolence. He said, rather than asking whether our protest will be nonviolent or not, I ask you, are you willing to risk your life in defense of me and my family? That question was a profound one for me, and it shifted my consciousness. Another friend who is Indigenous taught me that when she takes a step out of her front door, the police view her as violent. All of these friends, including Alan, have taught me to question my assumptions about what violence is. I first met Alan in the streets as a leader holding a megaphone on the front lines of anti-war protesting. Which war? The Iraq War. So not that long ago compared to some of you here. But I got close to Alan when I joined the media collective down at Channel 27 Public Access TV, helping to produce the weekly live program called the New Mexico Indie Media Show. That was probably in 2006, so about 15 years ago or so. It was in the studio in the county building just off of Civic Plaza. Alan co-hosted the show at that time with Maria Santelli, who used to be the co-coordinator here with Cecilia Chavez. The crew also included Steve Mills, Mike Swick, David Cooper, as well as many others who would come and go over the years. The show featured social justice topics and live guests who were organizing against war, imperialism, capitalism, Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people, fascism, and other liberation struggles. He never failed to remind viewers, week in and week out, that the murders of the women found buried on the West Mesa had not been solved. The show educated hundreds of viewers each week, but was abruptly shut down by former Mayor Richard Berry in 2012, when the contract that quote-unquote Media Center held for over 30 years was taken away and given to an evangelical Christian for-profit production company called UPublic, which in short order silenced social justice and government watchdog programming off the air, including Don Schrader's show. Hi, Don. Clearly from my heart, right? Alan served on quote-unquote board of directors for many years, including as its president. He was a mentor in fundraising. Many of you probably remember his particular method of fundraising. He would take out his little black book and start making phone calls. He could raise $1,000 in no time just by reaching out to his many friends all over the country who were part of the movement. For Alan, it was all about relationships. Alan and his wife at the time, Allison, who would often invite the crew over to their home after the show, We would eat and drink and tell stories. Allison would secretly find out when one of us would be having a birthday and come out with a birthday cake. I remember that. The two of them created a sense of family with their hospitality. All those hours spent together hanging out, I think I took that camaraderie for granted. I see that now since the COVID pandemic has created so much isolation. Alan always made his special popcorn with red chili pepper and brewer's yeast, and who knows what else. And Allison obviously knows because she brought some here today, and so did David Lopez. He would always bring his special homemade popcorn in a brown grocery bag as his contribution to any potluck. So good. I know many of you are going to share your own stories, so I will stop here, but I wanted to share two more things that stand out for me. First, that Alan was instrumental in my deciding to commit civil disobedience. This was back in 2014. I found myself being asked to join with others and do what it took to get arrested during a sit-in at Mayor Barry's office after the Albuquerque police had fatally shot and killed 5 people over a 5-week period. It was not an easy decision for me. I was hesitant and a little scared. But the stories of all of Alan's many arrests, especially during his civil rights work in the South, inspired me to push myself out of my comfort zone, and I have never regretted it. I was only in MDC overnight, but the experience was profound for me, and it changed my view of incarceration. I used to be for police reform, but am now an abolitionist. And Alan played an important role in that transformation. And finally, I'll share that I am so grateful and feel so privileged to have gotten to know Alan and to call him my friend and comrade. When I worked as the coordinator here at the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice for 7 years, from 2012 to 2019, he was a huge source of moral support. He used to listen to me when I would share my troubles, the challenges of trying to get the board to shift towards more equity, to address the fact that this space has long been viewed as a white space. He always told me, "Do you want me to go to the next coordinating council meeting?" He always had my back. He would pull out his hard copy agenda and a pencil and start looking at dates and his availability. Alan Cooper was always ready to throw down for the cause. Alan, I love you. I have so much respect for you, and you will never be forgotten. Please join me in saying Alan Cooper presente. Alan Cooper presente. Alan Cooper presente. Alan Cooper presente. Thank you.
I am horrible at remembering the words to songs. But at this time, I would like to take a moment of silence. Thank you for that. At this time, well, first, before we go to the food, because we are about to break bread, I'm sure you guys are ready to eat as well. I do want to remind you that there will be time shortly thereafter for everyone to share. I know everyone is itching to say something, and so we're going to get to that. But please mingle, get to know each other, share your stories amongst yourselves, but also there'll be time to come to the mic. So let's go ahead and break bread, y'all. Oh, yeah, a couple other things. We have a guest book in the back. We have an exhibit that's been put on if you guys haven't gotten a chance to see it. There's also a slideshow going on in this room if you want to check that out while you're waiting in line to get food, all right? I don't have a dinner bell. I would ring it.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Peace Center. It's been here for about a couple thousand years, and I feel that old myself sometimes. And we've all been doing our part for all these years. My name is Bonnie Bloom, and used to played for many benefit for the Peace and Justice Center, and I wrote this song partially inspired by Alan and partially inspired by a lot of other things. He and I were in a cafe one time, sitting in a booth, and he may have had the same conversation with you sometime too. That was like, come the revolution, there'll be enough for us all. That was his. So that's in the song. And this song is called Crazy Moon. South wind is blowing on me. What are you trying to show me? Blowing through the desert all the way from the sea. Next year at this time, where will you be? Playing in a band in some broken down saloon. Playing on those crazy nights and crazy moons. Crazy moon. Crazy moon. Come the revolution, there'll be enough for us all. We'll tear down this prison, we'll tear down this wall. And all my love will pour down, all my tears will fall. And we'll see the unlived moments inside of us all. And it might come too fast, and it might come too soon. But there'll still be those crazy nights and crazy moons. Crazy moon. Crazy, crazy, crazy moon. Other seasons, they go forward, turn around, double back, and they flow. And you find something you need to know right before the show. And this falling in love, and falling in love makes you feel just like a fool. On account of those crazy nights and crazy moons. Crazy moon. Crazy moon. You don't have to be an astronaut to go to the moon. You don't have to like green cheese to go to the moon. Just look up at the sky on a winter night, you can go to the moon. Just look into the eyes of a stranger, you can go to the moon. Oh, just make love to a man, you can go to the moon. Just make love to a woman, you can go to the moon. Crazy moon.
right, guys. Well, first I want to say thank you guys for your grace. This is my first time doing this, but oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So we don't have a sign-up list to speak. There are no gatekeepers. I am not a gatekeeper. You are all the gatekeepers. So I hope that we can all share time together. I know we all have a lot to say, but we want to give everyone that has something to say an opportunity to say it. So I'm asking each of us to manage that for ourselves and respect each other's time as well. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. I don't want to be a gatekeeper. Is it okay if I'm not the gatekeeper? And I'm going to ask that you guys please try to keep it. Please try to keep it to 2-3 minutes max. Okay. I said try. I said try. Yeah. Okay, 20-30 minutes max. Okay. It's your life.
Thank you. I don't know if you recognize this picture, but that's Alan Cooper and myself with the sign saying, "War leaves every child behind." That was one of the demonstrations we were in. My name is Bill Orzen, and we used to be called Cooper and Orzen. He always had top billing, and he deserved top billing, no question. Sort of Abbott and Costello, Cooper and Orzen. I met Alan in 1968. I came here from New York City to go to graduate school and try and get a master's degree in sociology, which I'm proud to say I failed to do. Because that and whatever it costs to get on a bus, I could get on the bus without the master's. Same thing. Alan, first time I saw Alan was he and a fellow by the name of Manny Wright, who lives in Albuquerque. Another guy by the name of Larry Russell, and he disappeared. And they were the Air Force ROTC doing their marching, etc. And Alan and Larry, they were disturbing it. That is the first time I ever saw Alan Cooper. I was sitting up in the stands as if it was a football game, and they're running and they're disrupting and so on and so forth. And I just watched and watched and watched. They did a great job, by the way. But I knew that I wanted, coming from New York, I was part of the 17th Street Peace Parade Committee, where I was active in that, and then I was active against the racism of the New York Athletic Club, et cetera, et cetera. This is way before I got to New Mexico. But I knew I wanted to get involved with activists here in Albuquerque, and Alan Cooper appears. And we stay involved forever. Like I said, 1968 on. I do miss him, and I always will miss him. He was an amazing person. You all know that. He was an amazing guy. We didn't always always agree on the tactics, but we always agreed on the aim, what it was we were trying to do. That's something we did. Funny story, I was chairman of SDS, and Alan, of course, was in SDS, and something occurred, and I was told I had to suspend Alan Cooper from SDS. No more meetings for 2 weeks. God. No, truth. So I made sure that when I suspended him, we had no more meetings. In other words, we had a meeting on a Thursday, and then the next meeting was 2 weeks Thursday. And I said, 2 weeks suspension, perfect. He never missed, anything, and he got clued in. I do remember being in Alan's house and helping him find things. It was the beginning of his demise, if you want to call it that. Maybe it was, and it was hard to watch. But I want you to know that Alan was truly a fine man, truly a fine man. He tried to be sensitive to everything that was appropriate to be sensitive to. And he pretty much accomplished most of that, if not all of it. So at one time, we were probably best friends. I mean, we would see each other all the time. Rarely were we not with each other. I remember we bought a can of Clouds of Contentment tobacco. Clouds of Contentment tobacco came from San Francisco, and it was in a powder blue can. And my sociology mentor, Dr. Hal Meyer, and who was also Alan's mentor, the three of us would sit and roll tobacco in his office, in Hal's office, and it was like a chimney in that room. I mean, anyway, there's so much more. There's his son, Malcolm. I was honored to be there when they brought him here to New Mexico. And that was really something, especially for Alan, especially. I just want to tell you that, one last, his favorite TV program was MASH. Love MASH. Someone bought him like all the CDs you could put in a container. And I used to sit in his house, he and I, and would watch MASH over and over and over. But he loved it. I loved it. It was no problem. Anyway, thank you all for coming and honoring him. And I want to tell the next person, your turn. If you want to see this picture, I'll be more than happy.
Thank you very much, Bill. My name is Roberto Roybal. I started working with the Southwest Organizing Project back in 1980. I was on the SWAP staff for over 30 years and retired last year. And matter of fact, I just came from our 35th annual Chile Fiesta, which was also this afternoon. So I first met Alan in about 1970 at UNM. I remember the demonstrations, the huge demonstrations we had against the university when they tried to get rid of Alan for his extracurricular activities at UNM. And I can remember the hundreds, literally hundreds of marches we had down Central with thousands of people fighting the U.S. war against Vietnam. Alan would join us I was with the Albuquerque Boycott Committee, so we were picketing against the grapes, against Coors Boycott down at the quarters on Yale every single Friday for I don't know how many years, and Alan was always there. I'll always remember Alan for his commitment and his work for social justice. He was always a strong supporter of the Southwest Organizing Project. He was always at our activities. You'd always see him there. And I will keep it short, but just want to say that Alan is a true hero. Thank you very much.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I'm going to be brief. I want to say two things, not in chronological order, but I think Malcolm is no longer in the house. Is that right? Oh, there he is. Okay. Um, that's one of the things I want to mention is that Cooper was crazy about Malcolm. And part of that love meant that he wanted Malcolm to be in touch with his roots. When I made a trip to Ghana, after I returned, Alan cornered me and quizzed me on who I went with, how I made arrangements, because he wanted Malcolm to go. Did you get to go to Ghana, Malcolm? Yeah. So that's one of the strong memories that I have about Cooper. The other one has to do with my coming here, which was in 1986. And I can't remember exactly when I first met Cooper, but from the start, I'd hear his tales of exploits and adventures. He'd talk about marching with Martin Luther King. He'd talk about working with the Black Panthers. He'd talk about standing with AIM, the American Indians movement, at Wounded Knee. After a while, I began to have some doubts. I'm thinking, could one guy have been all those places and working with all those different groups? Well, what removed the doubt was there was a program at the, I think it's the First Congregational Church on Girard and Lomas. There was a program on Native American problems. And Vernon Belcourt was speaking. Vernon was one of the leaders, one of the founders and leaders of the American Indian movement. Well, he interrupted his speech and came away from the podium to embrace Cooper when Cooper entered the room, gave him a long, long embrace. So that removed all the doubts in my head about Cooper and his long list of exploits. I'm gonna miss him.
So, Alan, I'm going to try not to cry, and you've been talking to me in my head all day. I was going to write some speechy speech because of how much he has meant to me as an activist. I'm currently working as the outreach coordinator for the Public Access Channel 519. This was a battle. Ray Garduno, would you please stand up? Because you were really intrinsic in this. You and Rosemary fought the good fight in the council, and I wish she was here. But you meant so much to this battle. Just you standing up for us, you going to those meetings, trying to find out what was going on, is one of the big reasons we still have this station. I would also like to thank Willard Hunter. Willard, where are you? Okay, Willard did a tremendous amount of work finding out what was going on behind the scenes about why the channels were trying to be taken away from us. I fought a long fight, quote unquote people. Sue Skirman did an amazing job. We've had an amazing amount of people, but Alan was, so the voice in my head today with Alan was, I said, Alan, I really want to write this great speech about you. And I heard his voice saying, just be yourself. That's all I was. Just be yourself. I'll be happy if you're just yourself. And I was like, okay, but how do we replace you? I mean, you marched with Martin Luther King. You did so many things. Like you were everywhere all the time fighting for everything. And it's just, I don't think we're making those people anymore. And Ellen's voice said, how do you think I felt after MLK died? And I heard it really clearly in my head, and I wish I was making it up. He said, I wanted to give up. Here was one of the greatest gifts to humanity in modern times for why we need to keep fighting and what for, and they just stole him from us. And he said, I kept going because what Martin Luther King taught me, what all of these people taught me, is that we are legacy bearers. And what we do is we may not be Martin Luther King, we may not be Alan Cooper, but we can take their legacy on our back and keep marching forward. And I'm just really proud to say, and the reason I'm so emotional is because I wanted him to be here for it, is that we did get the station back. John, I have to tell you the best story about our mayor, as far as Don Schrader. Our mayor had done actually an audit for me of what was going on with the monies, and he couldn't go back far enough to go after anybody, but he knew what was going on. And so I understand from City Hall, one of the first things that Tim Keller did when he got in office was say, we want the station back, and I want the first show to be Don Schrader. So I'm just telling you right now, let's make sure that Alan's legacy is borne forward. Every single one of us, we're never going to be Alan. Nobody can be. But let's just take it forward, and please, please, please come. The way we keep the evil demon cable companies from coming after our beautiful little almost 50-year-old station, it's one of the oldest in the country now, is that you're producing content for it. So please, 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 Ray, come and be interviewed. Let's talk about the history. Let's talk about why you got excited and interested. David, let's get you back here. Please. Sue, come on, if you can. I know it's not the same as it was, but nothing is now. And there's some really good people who believe in free speech and believe in community. So, Don, thank you. Let me see you at the station, please.
And feel free to introduce yourself, say your name for the record, if you like.
I'll stay behind the mask.
Okay.
All right. So mine is very short. We've been talking about how various acts of bravery and courage performed by Alan Cooper. And one that has gotten overlooked is that he took the very brave step of running for public office. In 2000, he was the Green Party candidate for State House District 12. So I think it's an act of bravery that shouldn't be forgotten, particularly in modern times, for people who candidates who tend to represent the people have a tough time. So let's remember that about Alan and remember that going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Bob Anderson with Stop the War Machine, and I want to just, gosh, I don't know. There's so much been said here tonight, and it's really great about Alan. But I think the networking and everyone coming together has been really great here. I keep running into people and folks here that I've known for years, and I've forgotten all the details. And everybody getting up and talking a little bit like this is sort of bringing back some memories to me too. And Roberto was talking about the grape boycott. You know, I remember doing that a long time ago, and that's where I think I first met Alan on that boycott. And then I came back to get to know him later around the Wounded Knee thing and the struggles over at UNM here after Larry Casus was murdered by the police over in Gallup in 1973. And so I just wanted to touch on that just a little bit. But before that, I do that, I want to say something else, a couple things. There's a guest book in back, which I think it would be really good for everybody to be sure to sign before you leave tonight. And I think we've lost a lot of people, but people will be remembered somewhat through that. And this event tonight was organized by sort of Ida Gordon, who's standing over here. Ida, raise your hand. Allison Frank, where's Allison? Allison's back there. And Sue Skirman, who's up here, who spoke early. They did all the legwork on pulling this together this evening. And Mike Swick is over here on the camera, which he's been doing for a long time. Did I catch everybody, Allison, on that? David Cooper, you know him here. He's a good MC. He's doing this. So I just think we want to thank all those folks who put a lot of time and effort into this. And I want to hit people up for a donation for over here there's a box to pay for a contribution to the Peace Center for the use of space here tonight. The center itself is going through some hard times. And we're trying to get that organized, and so any kind of donations on that will help on that too. I want to back up just a little bit about Al. You know, one of the things when Allison and Ida and Sue started putting it together, back there on the table there's the obituary for Al. If you get a chance, pick this up and take it with you. You know, everybody's described Al as a hero. He was a hero in many, many different struggles and things. But you know, beyond that, when you look at how they wrote this and put it together, his life, he's actually a legend, a legendary hero that needs to be his story told in so many different ways beyond just us here tonight. This is a way I think of continuing his legacy and the struggles of all of what he represented. And the way things in history work, I taught some political science over at UNM for a while, is that people take up things like Alan's life and turn it into a legend and build the stories and build on it and build on it and build on it. And that's how that memory keeps going, and we remember people like that down through the ages. And so I want to just implore all of you here, no, I can't do it, and I'm not sure any one person can do it, but try to, if we can figure out ways to continue the story of his life, I think would be really honorable to him. And not only that, it builds our struggle and the momentum for where we're going, because we're headed into some really dark times, I think, ahead of us. And we're going to need more sacrifices and struggles, and people like what Alan exemplified is going to be probably demanded of a lot of people and a lot of the youth who don't even know him yet. So I just wanted to say that. And this obituary was put together by Allison, Ida, and Sue. I think mainly it is an excellent and beautiful piece of work, and I read it. And when I just read this, I just like, oh my gosh. But I just wanted to touch back on Al. Everybody's done a little bit of that. Al came into my life through the Great Boycott. I remember going down there, and that was my first real political experience, I think, of doing anything like that. And like Sue talks about making commitments, and you take a step and you go do something that's uncomfortable. And I kept doing those kind of things, and that's where it sort of started for me right here, and in that sense. And before that was with Dory Bunting, who is one of the founders of the Peace and Justice Center, and Sally Alice Thompson and the folks who were instrumental in forming this. I had just come back from the Vietnam War and had been heavy in the war. And Dory Bunting, one of the people who later go on to get the Peace Center here started, when it was down the street there, and then it was over there, and then over here, said, why don't you come to a meeting and talk about it, what you did and what you saw and what it means? Because at that time we had this big movement in the streets and people were protesting the Vietnam War. And they got me involved in this in the anti-war movement and tied into the Peace and Justice Center, which was really a big turning point in my life. But Al was involved in this too. And I remember after Larry Casus was murdered over in Gallup, there was a protest over in the Yale Park area, right over where the bookstore is now. And Bill, you may have been there, I don't remember. But God, my memory's sort of fuzzy on some of the things back that far back. But I remember standing around the fire there, and Larry Casus, some of us had gone over to his funeral and had put dirt on the grave and stood there for a while. And we were back over here, and on the TV at that time, the AIM had taken over Wounded Knee in South Dakota. And so some of us are standing there talking about how bad this is. And if you remember, and this is the importance of literature and things like what Al is talking about, Dee Brown had written a book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which was a very popular book, and at that point it did a lot to educate people about the Native American experience, their cultural oppression and identity and the struggles they had. And we were all standing around talking about that, and then Russell Means is on TV that night and saying, come help us. He was up at Wounded Knee and we were down here. And I remember standing there around this fire with this guy, sort of bald-headed guy, sort of short, and we're talking about this and saying how bad this is, and people ought to be doing it. We ought to go help them. And Al says, yeah, let's go. And what changed my life again, and what's the next, it was probably about another 5 years before I got back to Albuquerque. You can see I was here really for a while. But Al knew a lot of people, and we had a Vietnam Veterans Against the War chapter at that time. We were protesting the war and organizing and helping getting veterans out and protesting the war. And there were several of us that were Vietnam veterans who got together and decided to drive up there. And this is a long story, which I'm going to write up sometime in a book, because we could have all still been in jail for exactly what we did and how we got there and everything like that. But I want to point out a couple of people here who were instrumental in that part of Al's life with Wounded Knee. And they were sort of not too speakative on this, but they're sitting right over here. Homer, would you stand up or raise your hand? And Diane Bird, right there, from Santo Domingo, Pueblo. Homer, myself, Wayne, and another comrade, Dave Begay, who was Navajo. Did I miss something? Okay. We all got in our cars and took off to Wounded Knee. And when we got there, after a while, we met Diane Bird, who from Santo Domingo, who had gone up to Wounded Knee on her own and with some other people. And so we all got to know each other, and this is a long, long story of our lives, and I'm not going to go into all of that. But those comrades are here as a part of the experience of Al, too, in his life and everything. So I'm just sort of going to leave it at that, because I could go on for hours talking about it, and I don't want to do that. I want to let some other people speak here. So I want to thank all of you for coming out and sharing this legacy, and let's keep networking. Keep this movements and all these things that Al touched into and touched all of our lives in different ways. He's been in struggles with some of you folks here that I don't even know and haven't just beginning to hear about. And so that's what makes all this amazing and makes us powerful, because together we are all strong and we can do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Buenas noches. Good evening. My name is Sofia Martinez. I'm co-coordinator of Los Jardines Institute, and I'm here tonight to really the legacy of what was Alan's life of movement building, of struggle and activism and advocacy, right? I met many Alan in demonstrations. Every demonstration that we're going to, at that time, Alan was always there. We fought a lot too, okay? Because I think everybody had that little legacy with Alan, and most of our fights, like Bill just said, they really weren't about the ultimate goals that we have for social, racial, economic, and environmental justice, right? It really was about the tactics many times. So many of the fights that we had were about the role of white people in the movement, in movement building in our communities. And we disagreed a lot on that, but that's not to say that I disrespected Alan in any way, right? We both knew what we stood for. We both cared about each other, and there was, there were really no angry words, just disagreement. Although the last time I did see Alan, I had had a bad day, and things were bad. So I always felt bad about that, because I responded in an angry way, and I know I hurt his feelings, and I didn't apologize. So I do feel bad about that. But again, it's not that we don't respect his life legacy, that I don't do that, and care about him and his work a lot. And my condolences to the family and his friends, and thank you to those people that really kind of supported him and all throughout his life, especially in the last few years when we need that. We've lost a lot of people. I'm glad that we honored Dorian. She's alive, But again, we didn't talk about some people that were really important in the movement, and that's kind of like a transition that's going on, a natural one, right? It's not necessarily like the youth are our future, because they are, but these are the natural transitions that we need to reflect upon, right? Because we're about building intergenerational movements, because that's when we'll be really powerful. We understand our role in those movements. So I did want to share a story about Wounded Knee. When we were in Raíces, Alan had a CD that was all messed up, but he insisted on playing it in the radio, right? So we fought about it, but he won. We did play it. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. My name is Beva Sanchez Padilla. I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you to all the people who organized this. And my condolences to the family. And I think Powell said one thing that I could say off the top. He loved Malcolm, so much. He was always talking about Malcolm. I timed this, it's 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And it's a letter to Alan. An honor to be here today to think about you, Alan, and how it seemed easy to be in our 20s during the 70s. Pushing towards justice in what Cornel West has said is what love looks like in public, and that is what you did all the years I did know you. 1970, UNM campus, you spoke on a high podium with Bill Orzen, shading in a history of injustice with facts and reason for marching in the streets. You had my ear. You empowered my work within Chicano studies and women's studies. You gave impetus to all who heard you. 1980, 1010 lead apartments. You with Helene Abrams, Tony and Miriam, their wedding, Bill and Bert, and the whole compound filled with love and purpose, education, activism, a movement of equality and anti-militarism that you and others worked a lifetime for. 1982, while I was working as a producer for KNME Public Affairs show, The Illustrated Daily, Alan, you came to me insisting that Alan Frankovich, with his film On Company Business, be featured. This film by your friend Alan Frankovich dealt with the collusions that the CIA had with all institutions of the American establishment and propaganda they inserted into public media. Alan, you were so clear, so adamant, and so strong that we did the show thanks to you. 2007, on the quote-unquote board, Channel 27, those late night meetings with Janet Bridgers, Steve Ranieri, and others, we labored over the strident yet healthy ideology that equal media access for even the homeless coming in should be making TV shows. You said that. Late at night, we would leave the meeting after eating your yeast popcorn, watching you on your bike, riding home in the dark like the warrior you are. 2008, East San Jose Elementary School. In the teacher's workroom, I am photocopying some material dealing with New Mexico history, colonization, and a Mr. Fernandez, a young award-winning star third grade teacher, looks over at the material and says, "You know, I was in high school when this guy came into our class and talked about the history of the folks here in the Southwest. I never had been taught anything about my history or my culture until this man, Alan Cooper, came into my class to talk. He changed the trajectory of my life, making me the teacher I am today. I thank you for him, Mr. Fernandez, and I thank you for others, Alan. You care, and you loved. Gracias, compadre. Gracias, compañero."
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Joe Fashing. My acquaintance with Alan goes back some 55 years or 54 years when I took my first teaching job after graduate school at the University of New Mexico. And I met Alan on the first day I arrived on campus. He was the first student I met. And the business was, would I be the faculty advisor for SDS, because I guess no other faculty member would. And the department chairman had mentioned to them that maybe I would do it if I came to campus. From that time, Alan became not just a student, but a close friend and a friend of my family, and one of the warmest, gentlest, most loving and lovely people I've ever met. And when I heard from my kids sent me a copy of the obituary, I live in New York now and have ever since I left here, I thought I've got to come out as an honor to him. He is one of the rare students. You know, they always tell you that you'll learn more from your students than they will learn from you. And faculty tend to brush that off a lot. They have big egos, and the idea that they will learn from their students is not something that they take all that seriously. But I learned more from Alan than almost any student, and probably than any student I ever encountered. And I just want to say one thing about his relationship to our family. He came to our place I brought a class over for dinner one night. I can't even remember why, but it seemed like a good thing to do. And Alan came, and immediately I had 2 young daughters, 7 and 6, and Alan immediately struck up a relationship with him, with them, and they loved him. They crawled all over him. They liked to get in his beard and stuff. And within about 6 months, they got a new puppy, a little white fuzzy thing, and they were trying to think of a name, and the name they came up with was Alan, because he was warm and fuzzy just like Alan. And I've got to tell you, when Alan found out about it, he acted as if it was one of the biggest honors he'd ever received in his life. And I'll never forget that. The other thing that I have to thank Alan for, I was feeling particularly down at one point because I was getting in the process of being fired at UNM for my relationship with SDS and countless other things that Alan led me into. But I told him at one point, Alan, I'm in danger of lapsing into cynicism. The world is so screwed up. And he said, Joe, don't ever do that. He says, it will ruin your life. You'll become sour and unhappy. He said, keep the faith, essentially. And it's something I've remembered all my life. And I'm going to miss him terribly. Thank you.
I'm Andy Hughes. Sometimes Alan needed to earn real money. And there were a bunch of people, including myself, who would hire him when he needed work. You know, you always found a way to hire him. So one time I had a job painting the trim in a house in Placitas, oil-based, enamel. And we start working, and I say, Alan, you need a little rag. In case you drip or something like that, you can wipe it off. So an hour or so later, Alan goes, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" And he had put the rag with mineral spirits in his back pocket. And it got wet through and got it on his skin, and it turned red, and it really hurts. And I said, Alan, you have to take your pants off. And he took his pants off. And he went, I said, Alan, you have to take your underwear off. And he took his underwear off. And I said, just be yourself.
Well, I don't have any underwear stories, but anyway, I'm Kent Patterson. Some of you may know me from KUNM, and that was one of the areas where I knew Alan from. I don't know exactly when I met him, sometime during the 1970s, but we coincided in different places. We were both belonged to like the Mount Taylor Alliance, fighting the uranium mining at Mount Taylor, and the Big Mountain Support Committee, supporting the Dene people that were resisting forced relocation, which I understand continues to this day. Also, we were both teachers at APS for a while, and we both have done a lot of work at KUNM. And Cooper went way back with KUNM to the very beginning in the 60s and did different shows. One of his most notable contributions to KUNM was from Wounded Knee. When he was up at Wounded Knee, occupying, helping the American Indian movement resist the federal siege and engaging in firefights, he was calling in reports to KUNM. and KUNM would air these on their news program. This was when KUNM was in the basement of the Student Union building. So the FBI got wind of this, and they showed up at KUNM and wanted the original tape that came over of Cooper filing this news report. The manager of KUNM at the time was a man named Mike Wolf, and he told the suits, as the FBI were known back then, you're entitled to a copy of what aired. As any other member of the public, you're welcome to have that if you come back, but I'm not giving you the original tape. That's confidential sources. So the FBI never came back, and the tapes aired. One of those tapes you can hear, it was recently posted on the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, which is the official, it's somewhat new, it's the official archive of public broadcasting, and it's managed by the Library of Congress and WGBH. And it's americanarchive.org. You can listen to it online. Alan Cooper calling in from Wounded Knee right after a firefight and describing what happened. So we coincided at KUNM, many other places. One of the things that came to mind recently was, I don't know if you all heard of an incident at UNM last week, where a group of students disrupted a speech by a right-wing basher. That immediately made me think of Cooper. He got expelled from UNM back in 1970 for disrupting a speech, and Bill Orson was involved in that too, I believe, right? Disrupting a speech by the segregationist Strom Thurmond. So here we are 52 years later, and sort of the same thing happened at UNM, and I was thinking, oh, Cooper's up there somewhere, and I don't know if he's got powers or magic, but he's at least smiling. I found him to be one of the most steadfast, resolute people I've met in my life, maybe a bit stubborn. The last time I saw him was about 3 years ago, shortly before he went into the veterans home, and he was not supposed to drive. He was, and I think Malcolm knows about this, where he was told, you can't drive because of his health condition. So I'm driving down the street one day, and I pull into the bank parking lot, and I see this truck, right? And you can't miss his truck because it's just plastered with bumper stickers of all kinds, right? And I see it, and I just go, damn, and stuff. So I walk into the bank, and there he is, carrying on with the teller, and I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I heard some politics being talked about there. And so he was, I asked him, how you doing, what's up? Oh, this and that, and he jumped back in his truck and he was off. And I think that was the last time I saw him. But I knew him for over 40 years, and he is one of the most amazing people, and I will second what a lot of people have said here tonight, one of the most amazing, dedicated, committed people I've met in my life, and I will always remember him. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Gallegos, before I formally met Alan Cooper, I actually knew him through the struggle, seeing him at protests and all that. When I formally met him, I was about 25 years old. It's when we came here to the Peace and Justice Center. I was involved at the time, and I'm still involved with an organization called the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And we had our office right here, actually. And I remember when I first met Alan, I was a little starstruck because I remember being a teenager in high school and, seeing him. And I would see that guy and I would say, look at that old man right there. He's just running around doing all this stuff. I'm like, I want to be that guy. I thought that in my head. I said, I want to be like that guy. I want to keep the struggle going. I want to keep doing what I'm doing, just like that guy. And so when I first met him, I'm like, hey, look, it's that guy. So I go up to him and he's like, "Hi, how's it going, young man?" And I'm like, or something or other. We just exchanged niceties, and I go, I recognize you from, the anti-war movement around the invasion of Iraq. He's like, "Oh yeah, I get around." And he was always very modest, never bragged about anything that he did, or never pretended that he knew more than me or anything like that. Always just very nice, and just meeting him and talking with him was just always just such a joy. It was just such a joy. Whenever I would see him, it was just like my eyes would light up, and I'd say, "Oh, finally, somebody I can talk to," And I'd go walk up right next to him, and we would just like joke around and pal around like we'd known each other for years. And I remember having one exchange with him, and we were talking about politics. I don't know how the conversation turned into politics, but well, of course, it's Alan Cooper and myself. But he says, "Oh, so you guys are socialists, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, He's like, "Well, what kind? You like Sweden and Denmark, or like Cuba and like Soviet Union?" I was like, "Well, kind of like Cuba and Soviet Union." I was very bashful. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. And he says, "Yeah, man, don't even worry about it. I mean, all of us are pretty much fucking communists anyway." And I was like, "Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate that." And he says, "Oh yeah, man. I'm not a pacifist, man, not at all. Like, I learned that way down in the South when I was organizing. You had the Klan shooting at you. There's no damn way you could be a pacifist. You either pick up that gun and defend yourself, or you don't at all and you die. And that's what I learned when I was down there. That's what he told me." And and I remember all these other stories too, his stories about Wounded Knee and all of that. But I remember one thing about Alan is that any action that we had, didn't matter what it was, didn't matter what other people felt about it, what other organizations felt about it. He never felt pressured to do anything except be absolutely supportive. He supported every single action that I ever called him to put his name on a flyer. If I asked him if I could put his name on a flyer, he would always say yes. I never heard him say no to me once. And that was his character. And it was an honor just knowing him for the short time that I did. I met him when I was 25 years old. I'm 37 now, and he made a real impact on me. Being a young organizer and not really understanding anything, not knowing anything around the movement and local politics and all that. It was great to see him because he was a warm figure, somebody who would always, it's like he was looking out for me. He didn't have to. All he lent was his ear and a good conversation, and that's all it took. That's all it took for me to feel welcomed, and he always made me feel welcome. And I even though I met him, as an adult, it kind of felt like I knew him ever since I was in high school, just because of that persona that he had. He really radiated this huge personality, and it was just so much to think about, so much to talk about, that I could probably stand up here all day and talk about how I felt about Alan Cooper and the influence that he was on me. And I just got to say that I'm glad that I met the guy, because he was like I felt like he was a real friend, even though we didn't go out and have beers or anything like that, like I probably would have with other friends. I did feel really connected to him, because every time we did talk together, it's like I was talking to a friend of 50 some odd years, and I'm not even 50 years old. So yeah, you know what I mean. So I got to say, my condolences to the family. I can only imagine, losing such a legend, like Bob said, a real legend, that guy. And, I'll always be thinking of Alan, and, yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi, Micheline Butler. Just a quick word. It was all a ruse, mostly to get Jerome to share some stories for me to come up here. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, as other people have already mentioned, Joel told my story. Thanks, Joel. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was young in Albuquerque, had met Bob and Jean doing anti-war activism of the early 2000s. Met other people through other things. I co-founded the Trinity House Catholic Worker, which still exists in the South Valley. Several people in this room I've met and seen and been in various stuff. I have a lot of respect and love for all of you. Even if we haven't talked in years, it's very good to see all of you. A lot of you have taught me a lot of hard life lessons that I've learned, thanks to all of you. And I think that's the main thing that I connect with Joel on is, regardless of the different directions and the different things that we've done together, Alan was always one who was always pulling for the young people and always rolling hard for the young people. And a lot of you also, Charles, you've always been there for us. Sally, Alice, of course, thank you so much. Bob and Jean, Sophia, a lot of people in this room, Enrique and Karen, of course. Right, you've always guided us and encouraged us and built that fire within us to keep fighting over the years. So I haven't seen a lot of you in a long time. It's been a really rough couple of years, but I just want you to know I have a lot of love and respect for all of you. And Alan, I mean, the last time I saw Alan, we had a sandwich together at a sandwich shop, and we had actually been drinking. So I beat you, Joel. But we were downtown, and we were with some friends, and right, we were arguing, as we always do, around Syria and Assad and geopolitics and all of that stuff. Alan was just, being really jovial and reminding us to not ruin our friendships and our relationships over our disagreements around the geopolitics situation, but to continue to struggle it out together and support each other. And on that note, I'm going to end it with one story, which is, I don't have any shame about this. It's a fun story for me, but it was Dory Bunting's birthday, I think, at the Peace Center. She had just been given the award by the Albuquerque City Council. And so there was some sort of event here. I can't remember exactly what it was. But somebody had snuck some Tecate into the Peace Center. Another drinking story, Joel. And it was just sitting there, and I think some of the older folks were shunning people and trying to hide it in the back. But of course, I grabbed one for myself and then sat down next to Alan Cooper. And Alan Cooper was like, "Is that a Tecate?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think there are some more around." So we sat at a table just in that area and celebrated Dory Bunting's birthday together with the Tecate. And that's probably my favorite Alan Cooper story. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jerome Chavez. I first met Ellen Cooper when I was about 16 years old, which is about 28 years ago, which is hard to believe right now. But there was a speech by Roy Bourgeois and showed a film about the School of the Americas, and afterwards we talked a little bit there. And from that, a group formed to do a commemoration for Oscar Romero and to bring more attention to the School of the Americas, and he was at those meetings. And I just saw him at a lot of protests and events ever since. I was working at the Peace Center in 2001, had a Vista job for tenant organizing, and that was when September 11th happened. And that morning, he was there, and we started kind of the first anti-war organizing. We found some old TVs to try to keep in touch with all the news that was going on. And one of the first marches after that, remember The crowd was singing "Give Peace a Chance," and some of those were just all cringing. Then Alan was on the megaphone, "Ho ho Ho Chi Minh, the NLF is going to win." Oops, wrong war. And but yeah, he just always kind of pushed it there. And he was also really big in media. He hosted Espejos de Islan and probably some other shows on KUNM. I got interviewed with him on there. And also I was involved during the Iraq War, I was involved with New Mexico Indie Media. We had him on for after he got fired at Highland for anti-war stuff. And we interviewed him. We had another guest on, and he was still there. And he just started asking the guest some questions. So it just like thought, hey, do you want to be part of this show? And it's like, sure. And so that's kind of what started him there, for better or for worse. Sometimes it did have some fights over, because he liked to talk and, also liked to interrupt, but, no one's perfect. But, I moved from Albuquerque in 2006, and, it's good to know that, that show kept on going afterwards. And, remember last time I saw him, I moved back to Albuquerque in 2016 and was at an Indigenous Peoples Day rally downtown, and I saw him there, and I introduced him to my girlfriend at the time. She was into Native American Studies. I'm like, yeah, he was at Wounded Knee, and then he's like, yeah, there's just something natural about shooting at the FBI. And also Standing Rock was going on at the time, and he was talking about going back there. And, knowing Alan, I wouldn't be surprised, but, I'm just, I just admire his life, because he kept on doing things, from, even before I was alive, and, just up until the very end. And, because, a lot of work still needs to be done, and, just, he knew what he had to do, and, he admired his life, and it's something to remember. Thank you.
Hello, and excuse me. I sat there first because I wanted to be first. Then a line formed, and I was like, oh, I'll just wait my turn. Mr. Cooper, I'm going to call him Fairfax, and I thought that was so cool. I always wanted a, distinguished name. I'm talking really loud. I don't need this. I'm okay. I'll talk a little louder. But anyway, Mr. Cooper, I worked for his son for years, and he used to always come in with the beret, and I was at UNM. I was the first offspring of Alan Cooper I was doing all of the things you guys said at UNM, like Alan, and I didn't know it until just listening to all these things. As a matter of fact, when we took over UNM and disrupted things, the Peace and Justice Center, I spoke here about 20-something years ago about what we were doing, and I thought to myself, I don't know if they're with what we're doing. We're disrupting, but every time something happened, the Peace and Justice Center was like the Underground Railroad to people who were agitating. You could come and get some support. And anyway, I wanted to come and say that Mr. Cooper, every time I was at Malcolm's shop, he would come in, and Malcolm has that same type of disruptive humor, and we debate all the time. And his dad was so different, and I was like, what? How did you get this out of that? And Mr. Cooper would tell me all of the stories. I was a history student, so I always wanted to hear about Vietnam or anything he said, so we sat and talked all the time. And I didn't know who he was until today. I mean, we were cool, like the young man had said. He just made you feel like you were, one of his friends. And at the time, he would always take my side when me and Malcolm would get into our, he'd say something. I said, "You just let that boy watch MTV too much." And he would say, "No, we definitely censored his CDs." So he was such a hard dad from my perspective. And then from Malcolm's perspective, he was, such a cool dad. But then 20 years later, when I met him, I was like, this guy is the first real Underground Railroad person that I met from hearing him tell me the stories. He was the first white person that I really, gave a light skin pass to because he was there before me. Also, he and I had a lot in common. He walked with the icons. Well, when I was at UNM, we brought the icons' wives, and I sat and talked with the wives, and he marched with the father. So when we talked 6 to 7 years ago, I was like, "Hey, that's not what I heard." He said, "No, I was there." I says, "Well, his wife told me this." He says, "Well, no, this is what happened." So Mr. Cooper was the hardest nice guy you probably met, but he was definitely serious, and I'm gonna miss him. I was standing back there reading, and somebody asked me, was I Malcolm? And I first thought, I was like, wait a minute, what? And I thought to myself, I could be Malcolm, because he really loved me, and he met me 3 or 4 times, and then we were cool. And he always went somewhere before he came to the shop to get Malcolm some nice pastry. And we really took it for granted so much, but then one week he didn't come. And those full pastries he used to bring, were real, his way of saying, "I'm still with your generation." He's so cool. He had the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then he made Malcolm into a real activist. So I wanted to come and speak and say I love Alan Fairfax Cooper, and he treated me just like a friend, and I'm going to miss him.
Wow.
Hi, I'm Ida Gordon, and it was really an honor to help create this event, and thank everyone for coming. I really, really appreciate it. It really touched my heart. I met Alan at Wounded Knee in 1973. I even got to live with him for 6 weeks while he was on trial. That was a trial in itself. And but one act of love that Alan, of all the acts of love that you all know about him, is that he got a shipment of green chili, and we were given a poached deer, and Alan made deer with green chili. And it was outrageous, but of course, a lot of those people didn't have the New Mexico sensibilities to appreciate what an incredible sacrifice that was. So I wanted to share that story. A lot of my work now politically is involved in getting clemency for Leonard Peltier. And one of the people that has been working equally as hard is Peter Clark, who had an office right there for many years. And he is now living, at least temporarily, in California, but he sent me this letter that he wanted to read to all of you. And I'm just going to read it through. Good afternoon. I am sorry we cannot be there with you today to honor our friend and brother in the struggle. My wife, Barbara, and I met Alan in 2008. Before meeting him, I had many people tell me the same thing: you need to hook up with Cooper. When we did meet, Alan immediately became a friend to Barbara and me. We will forever be grateful to know him and to have spent many hours talking with him. When Al and I would visit, both of us would complain at our frustration for not being able to overthrow fascism and for not being able to see the true liberation of Native people, to see the end of colonialism and capitalism, and we would talk happily about the cracks in that wall of oppression. We jokingly concocted elaborate fantasies about how to break Leonard Peltier out of prison. Folks may know that I work in aviation. Alan always joked about wanting to, quote, pull a Chuck Bronson, go in there with a helicopter and get Leonard out by any means necessary. Just like in the film Breakout, inspired by the real 1971 helicopter rescue and breakout of Joel David Kaplan from a Mexican prison. Given half a chance, Al might have done it. In 2016, Barbara and I and Alan traveled together and camped at Standing Rock. I regret that I was not able to join them to stand with the water protectors. A part of that regret is that I do not have those memories of Alan in action at Standing Rock. Barbara has those precious memories. One story that always overwhelms me took place on their trip back to Albuquerque. They stopped for a day in Pine Ridge, looked for old friends, and visited places like Keeley Radio Station and the cemetery at Wounded Knee. It was at the cemetery where a young person saw Barbara and Alan paying their respects. The young man was astonished to discover he was speaking with the one and only Honky Killer, the name given to Alan by his comrades. I cannot think of a higher compliment than to be known and remembered by the next generations of those Honky Killers stood with in solidarity and action against the tyranny of a violent colonial state. Our sympathies and condolences go out to Alan's family, to Al's dear friends, and many of whom have known him for decades. We share in your grief and sorrow. We could see how much he loved you all. To Norman Patrick Brown, our eternal gratitude for living with Honky Killer through the beginning of the pandemic and providing him with care during the tough time of his disease in the months before moving into the VA. My last good conversation with Al was at his house when we watched the funeral of George Floyd. Even though he was clearly suffering, Al was more concerned about the world, still ready for the struggle. At goodbye, Al and I always said, I love you. We always will. Thank you, Peter and Barbara Clark. And thank you all.
Hello, my name is Pancho Quiñones. Alan Cooper was my godfather. I met Alan Cooper in 1982. I had just arrived from the South Bronx. Albuquerque was a second chance for my family. I lived at the compound at 1010 Lead. That's what we called it. Alan was such a big influence on me. I hadn't had someone that was in my life like Alan was. My grandmother raised me in the Bronx, and my Uncle Tony brought me to New Mexico. When I arrived, there was someone sitting in the front seat, and he introduced himself as my godfather. I had never met the guy. And with Alan, you know, he provided the kind of support that someone like me needed. He was there from that day that I met him. He was there for me. We did canoe trips on the river. He took me to Wounded Knee. He was being honored, and we rode up to Wounded Knee. And sure enough, it was an adventure. We went in a van that I didn't think would make it out of Albuquerque, and sure enough, we broke down on the way back. In Nebraska somewhere, we had to back out of a pool hall because I got into a pool game. I was a little kid. I was a teenager, young teenager, and in the Bronx, I lived across the street from a pool hall, so I was pretty good. In Nebraska, we were already starting to break down, and as I was playing, Alan comes over and says, "All right, are we ready to bet?" And the folks in the club and the pool hall thought that Alan had this little kid and was trying to win, he was trying to hustle them. So everyone got upset with Alan, and he grabs me, grabs the stick, and we back out of the pool hall. That was a close call, it was. A lot has been said about Alan, and it's all true. I just wanted to lighten things up a little bit, and I just wanted to, I wanted to share those things and share how much he meant to me. I spent 23 years as a firefighter in this city, and part of that service that I wanted to give was from so much time that I spent with Alan as a child. I learned about redlining, what redlining was. I used to ask about the South Bronx, and I remember bodies laying in the street. Why were they there all day? Why was it us, the people, that had to go and cover them until somebody would come and get them? And it was usually an army of folks that would come into the neighborhood, the police, to come get the body and take them out. And Alan explained to me how we were living in the South Bronx at that time. And I always appreciated, those understanding those things and having those conversations with Coop. The second half of the story, when we went up to Wounded Knee, coming back home, we broke down, and we were picked up by a trucker who was a white supremacist. And he was interested in knowing why Coop was with this little brown child. Our trip home, I can't remember how long, it was a long time ago. I can't remember how long it was, but we actually, in our conversations in the truck with this man, became friendly. And whenever he would go across the country and he would stop in Albuquerque and have lunch with Alan and I at the Sanitary Tortilla Factory, we converted that man. I just want to say thank you, Mr. Coop. Thanks for the time you spent with me and the influence you had over me. I love you, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
All right. Has everyone that wanted to share gotten a chance to? Yeah. Yeah, let's thank Mike Swick. And also, let's thank one another for showing up and also for being a light. I have no doubt that the impact that Alan Cooper had in each and every one of our lives went on to be the impact that we had in somebody else's life. So let's give ourselves a round of applause as well. At this time, Mike, I believe you have a little ditty you want to start for us, and we are going to, if you got the stomach for it, join together in song as we close out our celebration of Alan Cooper's life. Shine, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. I don't hear you. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go. Okay, you can go turn that off, Mike. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I'm going to open it up to y'all to call it out here, and I want you to speak forth where you're going to let your light shine. And we're going to sing a couple verses. Is that okay? Okay. All right. Who's going to offer up the first place? Where are you going to let your light shine? Okay, I'll go first. I'm going to let my light shine. Oh, goodness. This is harder than I thought. I'm going to let my light shine on the streets. Okay. When I'm on the streets, I'm gonna let it shine. When I'm on the streets, I'm gonna let it shine. When I'm on the streets, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. When I'm in the courts, I'm gonna let it shine. When I'm at the court, I'm gonna let it shine. When I'm at the court, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you all so much. That concludes this evening. If you want to leave me a tip for my wonderful singing, you are welcome to do it, but I will not hold you to it. Have a great evening, all.
This song says, no matter who you are, no matter where you go in your life, at some point you're going to need somebody to stand by you. Oh yeah, oh my darling, stand by me. No matter who you are, no matter where you go in life, you gonna need somebody to stand by you. No matter how much money you got, all the friends you got, you gonna need somebody to stand by you.
When the night has come and the land is dark and that moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't shed one tear. Just as long as your people come and stand by